We have started to record. We have the next hour to talk about major gifts and where to find them. I am Jeremy Beer. I am the principal partner at American Philanthropic. We're a strategic consulting and services firm for nonprofit organizations. One of the things we do is providing assistance, advising, coaching, counseling on major gift fundraising. I am talking to you from Phoenix, Arizona. I am very happy to have with me today my colleagues Cecilia Diem and Justin Strieff. I will introduce them now. You guys can say hello now, but I'll give you a formal introduction, and then we will begin our conversation.
Thank you, Jeremy. I look forward to the formal introduction. I'll hold my remarks until then.
It's funny when you know people well, like I've never introduced you usually, so I had to go back and look at your bios to figure out what exactly you do and where you're from. Let me start with Cecilia. Cecilia is a managing consultant here at American Philanthropic. I believe she's coming to us today, probably is somewhere near Gettysburg. I can never remember exactly.
That's exactly right. We'll just say Adams County, Pennsylvania.
Okay, yeah, so we don't want to disclose your location.
Yeah,
that's right. We don't want to get too personal here.
Too personal. We don't know you people. Cecilia was at the Philanthropy Roundtable for some time, so she has worked with donors as well as on the major gifts fundraising side. She was also with Americans for Prosperity and Americans for Prosperity Foundation and the National Museum of Women in the Arts. Cecilia graduated from Mary Baldwin College, which I think this is great. Her majors were art management and painting. I had no idea that those were your majors, by the way.
Yeah. I ended up, I decided classics was too hard, so switched over to art.
Oh, smart move. It's great. Art management and painting is our preferred background for a major gifts person. So that's our first piece of advice.
Should be, yes.
Scour the painting and art management double majors. But yeah, Cecilia has a lot of experience foundation fundraising, major gifts fundraising, also on the philanthropy side. So it brings a very unique perspective to this conversation. Glad to have you with us, Cecilia.
Yeah, thanks for including me, Jeremy.
And Justin looks to me like he is at his home in Mesa, Arizona. Am I correct?
You are not, but no, I do not have a TV this large.
Oh. Where are you?
No, I'm at a business office. Just
an alternative, undisclosed location.
Conference room. You're asking too many questions.
Are you in Arizona?
I'm in Arizona.
I think it's important people.
I'm in Arizona.
You have to place people to be able to really listen to them. Justin is a partner here at American Philanthropic. Previously was Director of Development for the Foundation for Economic Education, also at the Goldwater Institute, also done some political fundraising, if that's of interest to people. And also has done all the development things, but a lot of major gifts. He's a graduate of the University of Missouri with a degree in public policy, which pales in comparison to the art management and painting background that Cecilia brings to this. But nevertheless, and that's us. That's where we are. Oh, good. We have already in the chat, Cecilia, someone has chimed in saying that they are a performing arts major themselves. So yes,
you've already done the first right thing.
Yeah, you're perfectly suited. Anybody can do major gifts. That is actually true as long as you have the right, as long as you are interpersonally not off-putting. Let's put it that way. And you know a few things about how this all works, and we'll go over some of them. So major gifts and where they come from. We could take this in a lot of different directions. I'll kick it off with some questions, and I'll be looking at the Q&A and chat. I'll take your questions and try to pose them to Justin and Cecilia. So this is not necessarily going to follow any particular arc in this conversation, but let's begin with you, Cecilia, and let's just start at the beginning. First of all, let's stipulate, we're talking major gifts. That how we define that varies by organization, right?
Yeah.
Right, varies a ton. Really varies based on typically how large you are and how big your donor file is.
Right, but generally we're speaking, Cecilia, what would you say the range is typically where major gifts start?
I usually say it's 1,000. For a smaller organization, it could be 500. And if you're a really small local, let's say Adams County Historical Society, maybe $100 counts as your major donor.
Right. If we go up the chain, the colleges, universities, hospitals, we're usually talking $5,000, $10,000, right?
But if I might for a second, I mean, I think
Yeah.
the 1,000, just to add color on this, I think 1,000 is really important though for really any organization, because look, you can read, there's literally just go to Google now and you can search what I'm about to say, and it's true, which is if you can write $1,000 check,
Yeah.
everything Google says is true, by the way, Jeremy.
Okay.
If
It was
you
on
can write,
Google.
if you can write $1,000 check, you're really basically separating yourself from 60% of America. I mean, there's tons of articles about there. 60% of America can't write $1,000 check for medical emergency. So if you're writing a $60 or $1,000 check to the St. Vincent de Paul, you've just said, I'm in this other class of folks, at least the wealthier 40%, presumably. So right off the bat, that's a strong indicator. $1,000 is a real indicator of at least some advanced wealth.
So Cecilia, we're talking, let's say for this conversation, we're mainly talking about $1,000 and up givers. Let's start with the small groups. I had no idea who's on it here with us today, but I'm sure we have some people, tell me in the chat if this is true, who are the presidents or CEOs or directors of development for smaller organizations. Maybe don't have much of a house file meaning active donors, maybe not have much of an active donor list. Where do you find major donor prospects? How do you find them if they're not already in your house file?
What a great question, Jeremy. What an important question.
Somebody suggested it to me who really knew what she was doing.
It's good. That's good. So I think there's a couple things. So the number one thing is what sector are you in? Because what you're trying to do is find comparable organizations, which will have annual reports where they disclose their donors, which will have public spaces where you can go in and look at their donor wall that has, you pay $1,000, you buy a brick. A lot of rural communities, including my own, have little, plazas in the town square where people buy bricks to like renovate it every couple, however, and you can go and say, oh, here are all the people in my community who can write a check for $1,000 to buy a brick. So that's your absolute most basic level, literal, physical, in person, walking into other organizations in your community and seeing what they work. Churches are a great example. I've never been in a Catholic church that didn't have a thing in the back that was like, here are all of our donors from the past, 150 years.
We call this guerrilla research, by the way, at American Philanthropic. We really recommend it. But yeah, okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Cecilia.
That's right. This is guerrilla research. If you have a little bit more, resources, for example, if you have a subscription to Foundation Center Online or a tool like iWave or Wealth Engine, these are also excellent ways to identify people who have given to similar organizations. Foundation Center specifically looks at the public foundations who are giving away money. So you can filter by area, by category, by type. You can also just restrict it to, I only want to look at people who funded anything with the word ballet in LA County in the last 5 years. They actually just went through an overhaul about 2 years ago, and it's much improved, their search function. Keep in mind, that's going to give you foundations, but all of those foundations are made up of board members, and many of them, the vast majority of foundations are small family foundations with living principles. So that actually ends up being a great pipeline for your individual prospects too.
Yeah. So I'm going to take this over to Justin now, but let's start. I'm seeing in the chat, we actually have a lot of people for whom this is actually potentially useful. So guerrilla research, the first thing you're doing is you're just building a list. You got to have a list of potential contacts. I'm going to come back to Cecilia later and ask her about the prospect conversion rate, which is something you should keep in mind. But you got to build a big list of potential donors. The first step is just like in your community, on the bricks, the plaza, donor walls, programs at the opera and the symphony, all that stuff. Then there are tools you may have to pay for, not too much. For what's iWave? We have an idea, guys, what a subscription to iWave might cost. $1,000?
I don't know.
I don't think it's that much.
Somewhere between $1 and $10,000. Call them, but
but many of them offer tiers and everything.
Yeah,
like
if you're
that,
small nonprofit, maybe $500. One of the best investments you can make. Also in that Foundation Center Online that Cecilia mentioned, make sure you get that too. One of the best you can make. Liz Pala, my colleague, partner, just chimed in, is at $2,500. Thanks, Liz.
But there is free stuff, even like GuideStar. You can go
Yeah.
on GuideStar, sign up for a free account, and there's a certain number of filters and selecting tools that you can use to find stuff for free.
Right. What else, Justin? Where else can people find? Again, looks like we have a lot of startups and new nonprofits here.
Yeah.
Where do you find those initial major donor prospects if you don't already have donors and look at that file?
Right. Well, I mean, first off, I mean, yes, this is more guerrilla stuff, especially if you're a startup. But I mean, your own network, of course. I mean, everyone knows at least a couple wealthy people or ultra rich, and so working those networks, getting them involved, asking them who they know, asking them to invite their friends or their network to a meeting or a small event. That's always great, because then that's already offering credibility for your organization. If Jeremy knows Celia and I asked Jeremy to invite Celia, like, now I have credibility, because with Celia, because of Jeremy. So doing that kind of stuff is really important, especially in the startup phase. It's super important.
You gotta work your network. You can't be afraid to work your network. That's basically the message here.
100%. But it doesn't end too. That's the thing. It's not just a startup thing. I mean, when you're a large organization and you're raising $100 million, we should still be going to your major donors and your board members and saying, hey, who else do you know? Who else can we bring into the fold here? That networking, like, just truly never ends at any level of fundraising. So that's one. I mean, two, the more guerrilla stuff. Look, most organizations put out annual reports and they make them public. This is public information, and they list their board members. Board members are often financial investors in nonprofits. So great, go to them. There's many, especially in some faith-based circles, many lists, pages upon pages of supporters, and they might even do the work for you and tell you, here are $10,000 plus supporters. Here are $1,000 plus supporters. I mean, that takes work. It's guerrilla work, but I mean, literally these names are being offered up. And the good news is, if it's the Salvation Army of Phoenix, and they list all of their supporters, well, with a high probability, you're going to know most of those are in Phoenix. So I can, again, just go to Google or some other services and say Jeremy Beer Phoenix, and start finding them pretty quickly. So yeah, some tactics like that. Obviously, I mean, depends. It's not always the greatest idea when you're a startup, but at least at some point, direct mail is a great way to start getting into it. And we can open that can of worms if we want, but direct mail to start identifying donors and your future major donors. The reality is, we say this till we're blue in the face at our firm, which is your next major donor is almost certainly giving to you already at a lower level. So start direct mail or your online fundraising or whatever it might be. Start the mass fundraising, so you can start identifying your future major givers. So find the 500 donor today, the $1,000 donor today, and make contacts, start working them, and get them up to the 10,000 or whatever it might be. And that's much easier to do, obviously, than some of the guerrilla stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's obviously a huge advantage here if you already have a file, and we can get into that a little bit. Cecilia, let's just say, regardless whether you already have a file of 1,000 active donors, you have a file of 2. But let's say you have a goal of finding 20 people over the next year to give you $1,000 or more, whatever the goal is. But 20 major givers, whatever the threshold might be. How many prospects do you need, real prospects, to get 20 gifts? I assume it's more than 20.
Sadly, it is. That's correct. Yeah. I think this is more new. I don't think it's purely scientific. I have found that it tends to be, so the larger the organization and the better the prospecting machine, as it were, I think it can go down to like 4 to 1. So 1 donor for every 4 prospects. But I think it's usually 5, 6, especially for an organization. 7. Yeah. If you're starting out, you might, that's not to say that all of those people won't come in at a lower level. You might get half of your $1,000 prospects to give you like $10 or $100, but to actually get them at the level that you want them, it's, I don't know, anywhere between 5 and 10 times as many, probably.
I think that's good. I think that's right. It obviously depends on the warmth of the prospects. Do you already have a relationship with them, or does someone on your board have a strong relationship with them? But it's a really good point. I'm glad you made me bring up this question to you. It is not 1 to 1. It's not 1.5 to 1. It's not 2 to 1. It's 4 or 5 to 1 or higher. So it's a numbers game. You've got to really invest in finding prospects to get to the number of actual donors you
Right.
want.
And
Justin,
by the way, the
Yeah.
guerrilla prospecting is something that you can enlist volunteers in. Like if you're a startup
Yes.
org and you
Yes.
have super limited time and you're the one-stop shop, if you have people who are willing to help you unpaid, ask them to go do some guerrilla prospecting in the community and Googling online. A lot of places have community foundations that will give out like a philanthropist of the area award. And it may not be a billionaire if you're in a rural part of the country like I am, but you're still looking at someone who's invested in the area and has a decent amount of money. So,
Yeah.
all right, had to jump in with that. Got to use
I love it.
volunteers.
Yeah. Justin, anything else you want to say about the prospect?
I'm just looking at some of the questions, and I think there's one question that's just worth it, which is just saying, for organizations that have been around for a while, and so they've exhausted some of these channels, where might we go to find new bases of support? Yeah, I mean, one of these, what I would say to this initially right off the bat is direct mail and online and some other things are really not exhausted channels. There's 330 million people in the country and more being born every day, and the country's growing. Like there's a big pool here. So presumably organizations haven't mailed, 330 million or whatever their select might be for their focus on what their mission is. So direct mail is not one of those things, as far as I'm aware, that really, that's worn out now. We should put it up on the shelf. That's something you're doing in perpetuity, the acquisition. But same thing with the networking. As I said earlier, the networking doesn't end. I mean, there are always new channels in terms of how to get gifts. You could go to corporate stuff. You could do some online, the GoFundMe type things and Patreons, but really it's direct mail, it's online, it's major gifts.
Justin, to get to that question, I assume this is somebody who probably already has a lot. They must have some kind of file. How do you leverage your current major givers to help you find the next major gift?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's a couple ways, and I couldn't even cover them all, but I mean, a couple ways are events are great. And I'm always torn on events because you got to take into the full cost, but we won't go into that. But if you're going to do events and you're going to do galas and you're going to sell tables, well, if Jeremy, is worth $100 million and I know he's one of my supporters already, well, Jeremy probably hangs with some pretty good people. And so for some pretty good prospects. So why don't
I
I
not
Jeremy
be good people, they may just be.
Fair enough. Wealthy people. But I might invite Jeremy to sponsor a table and say, hey, I'd really love you to invite 8 of your closest friends who you think might be interested in this mission. And right off the bat, I just picked up 8 prospects. So
Justin, you don't have to have a gala to do that. You could just ask Jeremy, assuming you have a strong relationship with him, whether he'd host something in a private room at a restaurant, the back.
It'd be even better. The one-on-one time that comes from that kind of thing, the actual ability to interact directly with the prospect more directly. That's you get that much more of that kind of thing than a big gala. So I'm actually pretty skeptical of galas, but the in-home stuff, invite them for meetings, whatever it might be. Lean on your board members. I mean, one of the primary responsibilities I view of board members, who are often, again, typically financial donors to your organization, is fundraising. And part of that fundraising is networking and introducing you to, in theory, they're on the board, so they want your organization to grow. So in theory, they're going to be open to opening up their network to you, and you should lean on them for that.
Yeah.
Let's go, Cecilia. I'm going to give you a question from Gabriel, who asked his question at 1:01 p.m. So he's been waiting patiently. When you have a major gifts contact who's assured you to call whenever and remain in touch, and yet you haven't gotten a hold of them for about a month, what would you do? Would you try to find another avenue to make contact, or wait for something exciting to happen that you think would pique his or her interest?
I would probably wait for something. So you don't need to be in touch with every major donor every month. I guess that's my first thought. I don't know when your last contact was. Maybe your last contact was actually 6 months ago, but you've only been trying to get in touch for a month. I usually aim for about 4 personalized touches a year, and one of those should be a solicitation. That's kind of like the basic, like, here's the process: a couple cultivation moves and then a solicitation once a year. So if you're not hearing back from him, first of all, it's the summer. Donors are busy, wealthy, and able to go anywhere in the world at any given moment. And especially this year, I think people are traveling a lot. I wouldn't read too much into it. I would see if you can get something a little bit more personalized, or like you said, something that would pique their interest, maybe something, an exciting outcome or something that you can point to as an impact of your work to kind of highlight and reach out again. And honestly, I always see, Justin, you can tell me if you find this true also, I always see an uptick after Labor Day. People are just back at their desks and ready to start thinking about philanthropy and work again.
Yep, I agree. There's certain points throughout the year like that, and after Labor Day is when people are kind of back in the groove of everything.
I just want to make one little comment on what you said, Cecilia, all of which I agree with. But the reason to get in touch, the exciting thing might not have anything to do with your organization. It might just have something to do with what you know is the donor's interest, right? So you know they have a particular interest in they're from Milwaukee, right? And the Bucks win the NBA title. Maybe that's the reason to reach out, right? It doesn't have to be about
But this is also, if I might, this is why we push direct mail and why we recommend direct mail to major donors. You don't know when you're going to get in touch with your major donor or any donor at the right time. So that's why continuing to call, regardless of whether or not they're picking up, continuing to email whether or not they respond, sending that letter whether or not, like, you don't know. I mean, you just might, it's about being front of mind. And, you know, there's a very out of sight, out of mind. That's very real.
Yeah.
Like, these donors are not waiting for you to call. So be in front of them, even though they might not be responding. And you just don't know when all of a sudden it's going to pop. And they say, hey, thanks for all your correspondence the last 6 months. I'm sending you 50 grand.
Right. Sorry, I've been out of touch. They're busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the assumption is that if they don't reply to you, you haven't actually penetrated their consciousness. So they're not thinking, wow, this guy is so obnoxious.
I'm ignoring the truth.
Right.
To the fundraiser. And you're like, oh man, I'm being so annoying, but they're not seeing that.
Right.
Odds are high they're not seeing that.
Feels so much differently on this side than it does on that side. Jeremy Miller wants to know, Justin, how, if the recently born, how often do they make major gifts? You mentioned they're being born every day. That's
very recently.
Jeremy
By that,
Miller,
I mean, there's people turning 18 every day. They're on, you know, they're turning 25 and 50.
a lot of 2-year-olds and funds out there.
70.
Also, Mike, I don't know who Mike is making good points in the chat about asking board members and donors for referrals and personal introductions. We talked about that. It's a big way to make to find new major gift prospects. Sometimes you might ask. Here's a tip that I recently heard from somebody. So I was going to riff on this for 1 second. Your board member may not trust you yet, or a major donor may not trust you yet. Have them introduce you. Tell them, introduce me to somebody who's not a major donor prospect, just anybody that we'll go to lunch with, that I will, you can kind of prove that you're not going to embarrass them. Sometimes that is a way to sort of win some trust. Also, Mike, thank you for the LinkedIn recommendation. Great. I love that. Yeah. So great way to find other connections.
And I've seen people, especially in the last 2 years too, I've seen an uptick in people actually getting in touch with donors through LinkedIn also. If you, sometimes the email address is unreliable, but you can get someone on LinkedIn and respond because it's, professional.
I love it. It is. It's professional, right? So it's kind of made for that kind of thing. Cecilia, we'll go to you on this one from Jacob. How many times should you call or email a prospect before you just move on?
I don't know what this meant. Jacob, this is a hard question. I don't know what the exact right answer is here. I realistically, knowing that development officers are very busy and hopefully you have lots of prospects that you're trying to move through, I say try to reach out at least 3 times and try to do that at least twice. So I would say, like, if you do it in January, you do like a call, email, call, or the other way around, like email, call, email. If you don't get a response from any of those, let it rest for a quarter, come back and try again. Yeah. Maybe try, depending on how valuable they are, maybe try a 3rd time.
Right.
But I do think the 1-2 punch of like email and call or LinkedIn, like switching up the method of outreach is really important.
What do you think, Justin?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this is one of those things that where it's, if somebody tells me I found it, this is the silver bullet. It's like, no way. So I think there's like a variety of ways you can do it. I like that. I think the only thing that's like really wrong is just, borderline harassing people, which I've seen where just like every week you're calling or texting them. You don't want to do that. But no, I mean, I like going in 6-month kind of waves. I'm fine with quarterly. But yeah, I have 2 things with that is being diverse in how you're doing that, whether it's a letter or a phone or an email, like switching up the channels. You don't know where they're going to be picking up or responding. And then 2 is being personal about these things. Just reaching out and saying, hey, I'm emailing on behalf of the Salvation Army. That will work. It will absolutely work sometimes, but it's not going to work most of the time. It's, find the thing. Hey, I see you're also on the board of, whatever it is, and we've got that connection, or whatever it is. Like, hey, I read your bio and I see that you're a big water skier, and like, I did water skiing in college, or whatever. It's like finding that connection and personal, and then they're going to want to respond.
We talk about that a lot, right? Trying to find a connection, dropping names, this is a time for shameless name dropping.
Right.
We have a mutual friend in, Susie Smith. It's good. I like to
honestly almost, it doesn't even matter how tenuous it is either, like the connection. Right. Just make it.
I also like, it shouldn't just be one thing, right? One email and move that can't work. It's got to be a couple things in short order. And you mentioned, Justin, a letter. I mean, that is something that we often recommend that surprises people, like actually sending a physical letter in the mail as like the first step. You think it's worthwhile?
I love a physical letter in the mail. I also love using that letter as an initial thing. And I think, Jeremy, you've done this, which is saying, hey, Celia, I'm going to be out in Gettysburg in this week, and I'd really love to meet you, and I'll be sure to follow up. And then, then you can use the email and the phone or whatever it is as that follow-up. But just letters are very important. People are swamped on their phones. They're swamped on their email inboxes. We stare at the screens all day. It's why I think direct mail did so well last year. Everyone was like excited to get something in their mailbox. So it's really, and it's just much more personal. You got your hand signature on there. It's very real, very personal, especially if you're going after like the typical donor class, 60, 65 plus. Like, they like that. They're gonna appreciate getting that kind of thing. Sorry, Celia, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, that's the important thing there, is like, make sure that your letter to them is like hand addressed, live stamped. This is not something where you can, I would not like print out a bunch of labels and run it through the postage printer. Like, you want it to actually look personal, so they open it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, Jeanette, thank you for the testimonial there to the power of LinkedIn. I think that's actually something we have not been recommending enough, now that I think about it, is using LinkedIn to get meetings with major gifts prospects. So thank you for that. All right, let's go to you, Justin. How do you qualify? Let's say you have a house file, from 100 donors to 100,000, but you got a house file. Who in there? What are you looking at to determine whether somebody is a good major gifts prospect when you're looking at the sub $1,000 people?
Sub 1,000. Yeah. Right, because we already 1,000 plus is already a good indicator. Yeah. Right off the bat, again, I mean, you just obviously the number one thing is dollar amount is very important. The closer you are to that 1,000, that's important. I'll start at one on disqualifying some people. Actually, I generally am of the mindset, and prove me wrong, someone here in the comments, but if you're making an under $100 gift, and I just saw this the other day, I saw someone make a $50 gift and they have a $20 million house in Beverly Hills. There is a disconnect between capacity and affinity and interest there. Like, you don't have the $20 million house and you're writing $50 million because you're really passionate about what we do. Like, there's in my view, there's a strong disconnect, and getting them from $50 to the $500,000, which they could probably do given the $20 million house, that is such an enormous lift and mindset lift that there's so much other low-hanging fruit. So my point is almost under $100. I hate to say to some extent, but in terms of looking at them as a major gift prospect, you're almost disqualified. Like, it's possible. Don't get me wrong. I know it happens sometimes, but it's very hard to get someone to move from the $10 donation to the $10 million donation.
So first rule for you is must have given $100 or more at once.
Yeah, generally I'm like $100. Now, playing giving, that's another thing, but we won't get into that. That you lower people. But I'm looking at $100 plus, and I'm usually taking those people and running them through a donor search. And I think someone asked about a donor search here somewhere. I think I saw that. But running them through a donor search, Wealth Engine or some others are okay, but we really like donor search these days. And finding their wealth screening, and that'll give you a score for how accurate it is that I'm actually looking at Jeremy Beer. Keep on picking on you, and then it'll give you a score about how accurate their wealth is, and then you can add on all these other fields. Do they own a private jet? Do they own a yacht? How much do they own in public in stock in publicly traded companies? How much do they make in political giving? Now I start adding those things up. Well, so Celia gave me $750, and I see she's gave $100,000 in political gifts last year, and she has $2 million in stock. And you start adding these things up, and you're like, well, Celia might actually be a pretty decent prospect.
Are you saying though that you weight wealth information higher than they've been giving a longevity of giving to the organization and frequency of giving to the organization?
Well, it depends. I mean, that's the thing. Like if it's been longevity of giving, I think is really important, because somebody could be giving a long time. And I've seen this actually, they've just been giving a long time at $250, but no one's ever asked them. So longevity is important, but $110 first time gift, and I well screen them and they're worth
among first time gifts, that makes sense, because there is no longevity or frequency.
Right. Yeah. But I do like longevity, because I've run into a lot of donors where it's kind of like, yeah, I just gave $250 because that's you guys always ask me for $250, but I was always waiting for you to call me, kind of thing.
That's right.
I've seen that a lot actually. Yeah. So looking at that frequency combined with the donor search score, but I'll tell you what, there is nothing, truly nothing more informative than about wealth than getting to someone's house and sitting in their living room, and you just you see the bracelet on the woman's hand or the car in the garage or whatever, and you start to piece a lot of things together, and that is like I think a really strong indicator of wealth, just going to their home.
Cecilia, this is a really good question that came through the chat just now. What do you think motivates someone to move from a lower or middle level, let's say $100, $250, to give a major gift, to go to $1,000 or higher?
Yeah. So the number one thing is being asked, I would say. I think that
that's actually so obvious.
I know it's so obvious that it's almost insulting, but honestly, a lot of times people just don't get asked. So they keep giving 50 because, like Justin just said, well, I always give 250 because that's what you ask for. They don't end up getting segmented out into another mailing, or they're not getting any personal outreach. So I think, so two things: one, being asked, but then, more philosophically, as it were, bringing people into the life and the vision of the organization is what's going to get them to give more. We see over and over again that even though donors may think that they're giving in response to metrics and impact, but they're actually giving in response to an emotional appeal and a feeling of involvement and commitment, and from the heart to the organization in question.
Right. Yes, the feels matter.
Feels, that's right.
We often talk about, when we talk about bringing people into the life of the organization, what we're trying to create is a sense of identity between the donor and the organization. So if they have the capacity, I guess my answer to that question from Evelyn would be, I feel that they feel identified with the organization is what motivates a major gift. Now, how do you do that? Well, you got a relationship is built with them. They feel like their story is wrapped up in the story of the organization, or they see the same stories in the people you're helping, and shared experiences. They come to something, you get them out. That's where the events make a difference. Is like, that's, you're affirming something when you go to an event. And then that very affirmation kind of boomerangs back and affects how identified you feel with the organization who hosted the event. So you guys agree with all that?
Yeah,
I definitely would. And I would just, tacking onto your event comment there, I would also say, this is, especially at events, this is where everyone at your organization is actually a development person. Like, it is so important for people who come to your stuff to have an amazing experience, that everyone be welcoming, professional, kind. Absolutely. You don't want, maybe you are, but if your junior staffer or your volunteers leave a bad impression, they're going to remember that. So I always used to give pep talks about how everyone in the organization is a development person, and this is when you're a development person.
Well, that's worth repeating over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, like Justin, let's go back to our startups. Let's not forget about them. You're one of the people who introduced themselves early in the chat. It's a new charity, and they've got a meeting. They got a meeting with Susie Smith to get to our fictional person, and she owns a business in town. She got some wealth, maybe not crazy wealth. She got some wealth, but you're coming to, let's say you got the meeting at her office. What do you want to go in with? What's that preparation look like? What do you take with you?
First time lower-ish donor with capacity.
You're gonna ask for 5. Well, that's a question. But what should you be prepared to ask for a specific amount of money? Or are you just trying to let Susie know what you're doing, and then later you'll ask for money? Like, what do you do?
Yeah. So there's, a couple different approaches. One, I mean, if you're meeting with this, billionaire, multi-billionaire, and you've been trying forever to get a meeting, okay, that's a different approach. And look, you've maybe take 2 years to get that meeting. You're absolutely doing an ask, and you're absolutely aggressive in there. It might take you 2 more years to get in that meeting. You do the ask, you do the whole dog and pony show, like you do the whole thing. So bring in all the people you need to bring in on your end. You don't hold anything back once you get into that diamond gem meeting that you've been trying to get into forever. But if it's a first-time donor or that's got a decent capacity, like you just said, or it's a prospect with decent level capacity, but not that billionaire level class. Yeah, I mean, there's 2 different mindsets. I mean, some are I generally go in with let's introduce you to the organization, let's get you involved. Identify, like what we said about earlier about making things personal. I want to identify what Celia is interested in, or whatever her name was that you picked. Susie.
How are you a major gifts officer? I can't remember their names.
Talk to Susie about what is she interested in? Why did she make that first gift? Why is our mission so important to her? Really uncovering what her philanthropic motivations are. Because that'll help you as the gift officer start to hone your message and the things that you want to focus on when you start getting into your pitch and your future cultivation. So like, I'm not even going to go in with an ask really until I know what Susie's even interested in. So I get it. She's interested in my organization, but I might have 20 different programs. So really it's an identification, a discovery.
So it's okay. Hold on. So it's okay to do a meeting and not make an ask.
Yeah. If you're doing, I would say, I mean, what in our own research, we look at organizations, and I'll just do this fast. We look at organizations, we survey hundreds of organizations every year, nonprofits, and asking them how much do they do cultivation meetings, solicitation meetings, whatever. And what we qualify, just looking at stats, is what we qualify as the most successful organizations actually meet more for cultivation than they meet more for solicitation. So if I'm meeting with Susie 3 times, I'm going to ask her, or I'm going to do a cultivation meeting probably twice and ask her for money only once.
Right.
So cultivation is king. Cultivation kind of, begets bigger gifts. And so you gotta, the cultivation is important. So especially in that first one, get to know them. I can't make a pitch until I know your interests.
Cecilia, should you do more talking or more listening when you meet with Susie?
More listening. Good question.
Correct answer.
Yes. Ding, ding. Definitely do more listening than you do talking. That's how else are you going to find out what Susie's interested? So that you can come back and pitch her on the perfect project based on her exclusive interest in saving puppies from, puppy mills or something.
From puppy places. What if you have the perfect deck? You have the perfect 12-page brochure to walk her through, and she keeps babbling on about her interests. So should you stop her and
I don't know why you would ever stop her when she's telling you all of her interests and personal story. Like all you're doing, this is intelligence here. Like it's only going to make your ask stronger later on.
Yeah.
Right.
Is it okay to follow up with an ask, like via email, letter, or some other way, or should you just wait for the next meeting?
I feel it is much better when you have the chance to ask in person.
Okay.
So if the meeting went well, so I like to have like a back pocket. So every meeting should have an ask. Not every ask is financial. Let me put it that way.
That's
so
good.
The first ask that you walk away with, like the first meeting, your ask might be, well, I'm going to be back in Denver in 2 months and I'd love to come back and give you updates on our program. Or maybe it's, well, we're having a gala for some of our 10K plus supporters and I'd love to, give you a chance to attend so you can see what we're all about. Can I send you information on that? It's not a financial ask, but you get them to commit to, yes, you can do this thing. And the thing is, they'll probably be relieved. Donors generally expect to be asked for money every time they take a meeting. I think, Justin, you tell me if you think that's right. That's been my experience. So when you come in and you don't ask for money, you listen to them and then invite them to do something that's not money related, they're very likely to say yes.
Yeah.
And the same applies, by the way, go ahead. No, you go.
No, you.
Well, I was going to say, if you do ask for money and they say no, that's when you also need to have one of those secondary asks in your back pocket to whip out, because they've said no to money. They probably feel bad saying no to everything. So if you come up with just keep them engaged in the conversation when that.
What would that be, Cecilia? What would be the backup thing? So you asked them. So I was wondering, Susie, if you'd be willing to make a $5,000 gift for our puppy saving program. I'm sorry, I just can't do that right now. What's next?
I would say, I completely understand, but I would love to, I'd love to come back to you in a couple months once we've launched that program, let you know how it's going. And we're going to be having a small dinner with our board members at the end of the month. And if you'd be interested in coming, I'd like to leave you this invitation for that or something.
Yeah, it's good.
I'll just quickly say the ask is especially important. Some it could be non-financial, as Celia said. The non-financial ask is especially important, even when the meeting is a train wreck. Susie's like, hey, you guys told me you were going to save 5,000 puppies last year and you saved 2,000. I think you got the wrong puppy saving director in place. And so you got to then it's like, whoa, I'm sorry, Susie, can I keep you updated? We're actually looking for somebody else. I'm so sorry that, you were disappointed with those results. We're making some changes. I'd like to keep you updated, on those results. When we actually kind of get the new director, can I bring them by to meet you so you can get a little bit more confident in our results there and where we're going this year? It's even more important to have that ask and that follow up, and the ask is to follow up when the meeting's a train wreck. It's especially important to push forward to finalize what that follow up, that non-financial ask is.
Every now and then you will have a meeting that's a train wreck. That's okay.
Yeah.
All right. How important is it, Justin, to go in with something that looks good, like a nicely designed something, a prospectus, brochure, a deck? Is that important, or do you not worry about that kind of collateral material? I
used to be years ago, I think of the mindset, I bought into it, which I hear a lot of. Well, we don't want to go too fancy because then they think that somehow fancy equals us wasting money or something like that.
Right,
we're just going to go in with our basic Word document and it'll make us seem more like we're grassroots. And I get that mindset. And I used to kind of think that way, but I completely disagree with it, actually, just in personal experience. And now with American Philanthropic, working with a lot of organizations, I am very much of the mindset of, this act as if mindset. If you want to be a $20 million organization, if you want to ask Susie for $1 million, you better go in with the $20 million, organizational mindset and $1 million look. That's what you better be going in for. So that might mean a flashy graphic design, get a graphic designer to design something and it's beautiful. There's this saying, and I believe in it very much so. And the saying is called the eye eats first. And, if, when you sit down, your eye's already making assessments, your mind's already making assessments of that burger. The donor, Susie's already making assessments on my pitch about how I showed up, the thing that I put in front of her, the words that I'm there's things that are already being assessed. So I've got to go in with my best foot forward before I even open my pitch deck. So it has to be beautiful.
That's good. Cecilia, I haven't eaten lunch, by the way. So you're saying the eye eats first, got me all flummoxed. I was like, man, I am so hungry. I've had meetings all day. It's true, right? That people, it's funny. I don't think less experienced gift officers may not understand this, or CEOs for that matter. People peg the level of giving based on where they think the size and scope and potential size of your organization is. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why foundations always ask to see a list of your donors and at what levels they can figure out. Oh, you're asking us for 100, but your biggest gift is 5,000. No way.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, presenting yourself as Justin said, like a $1 million organization is really important.
Cecilia, what makes a good gift officer? By the way, this is a question that Justin said I should ask him, but I'm asking Cecilia instead, because I like to keep everybody on their toes.
Keep it, wow, right. You're shocking me here. Well, obviously,
you're off the cuff.
A background in the arts is obviously the most important. Let's start with that. But truthfully, what makes a good gift officer? There's a couple of qualities that stand out. So one, Jeremy, you already hit on this, but being not weird is just the easiest way to say it. Being personable. You can be eccentric even, but you have to have enough emotional intelligence to interact with people and make them feel heard. Secondly, persistence, I think, is the other thing, because the vast majority of your job as a major gifts person is going to be reaching out to people over and over and over again and having people say no. And you have to not be disheartened by that. And you have to be able to pick up your bootstraps and keep going and pick up another cold call another prospect who is going to hang up on you probably.
Right.
So those two things. And then I think, being able to Like someone who likes puzzles is the other thing I would say. Like if you are someone who likes languages or puzzles, because it really is actually just matching what your organization does with what the donor tells you they're interested in. And sometimes it's not obvious. You might have to like do a little bit of like thinking through in your mind about how, okay, well, they're interested in puppies and I'm do public policy. But actually, if you think about it, there's a public policy connection because the number of puppies who are being sent, whatever, you see what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
I think those are probably the three things that I would say. But I am curious about what Justin would say.
Yeah, Justin probably has an answer to this question. So
Yeah, so I would say three things that overlap a little bit with what Celia said, but emotional intelligence, absolutely. Like you have to have that. It's similar to that, but not the same thing, is situational awareness. You know, like just being able to read a room as soon as you walk in. Emotional intelligence I view as much more one-on-one personal relationship. Situational awareness is being able to walk into a room and read it, and being able to almost sense, okay, these are the important people over there, or whatever it might be. Starting to sense the discomfort in the room when your president is saying something that he shouldn't be saying, whatever it is. Like that situational awareness is really important. And then the other thing I would say is this sharpness, and I can't really put a word to it other than sharpness, but the best gift officers I know can sit there and know really on the fly. They can go through their 100 assigned donors and tell you what the status is on every single one. Like they don't even have to look in Salesforce or whatever it is. They just, yeah, Jeremy, I know where he's at. Susie, I know where she's at. And she just gave 25,000. Like there's that sharpness to it and that memory of just knowing where they're at any time. I think it's really important. You just know your file so well, your portfolio so well to get there. But situational awareness and emotional intelligence, obviously the persistence and all that, but if you don't have those things.
Yeah, memory and recall do come into it too. Like you have to remember what your donors told you.
You need to cultivate that. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, we have some questions here, which because I wasn't looking in the right place, I hadn't seen. So I'm going to make sure we ask them. Trudy asks, can digital marketing successfully unearth major gift prospects? Justin, you nodded your head first, so you get first crack at that.
Yeah, I mean, I do a fair amount of this with several different groups, so I'm seeing a lot of it. What I would say is digital, in my experience, the digital stuff, whether it's online or it's texting and email, for whatever reason, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was not so great. And something has happened in the last 3 years. I think it actually had to do with 2016 election and how much texting and email went on both sides during all of that. I think it trained people in a different way. But regardless, since then, I've seen a big change. And I'm seeing 3 days ago, I saw a $5,000 gift come from a $50 donor off of a text message. Like it's happening. So yeah, but what I would say is like, it's not where you're going to go to is really direct mail or the guerrilla stuff that we say, go after the big prospects. Don't go into digital email and texting and say, well, this is where we're going to, raise our next, find our next $1 million donor. You might, but don't rely on that. The history and the proven history is with direct mail, the networking and those things. But look, it's changing, but I would say you should absolutely be investing in digital and email and even texting to build out that lower level file. Absolutely.
Cecilia?
Yeah, and I think some of that also depends on your audience. My understanding is that people who give online or people who give like via text message, first of all, anytime I get solicited via text message, it's for like $5 or less. It's like, could you give $2, $3, or even $5? Like they're asking for small gifts. And part of that is because they probably have all my demographic information. They know that I'm not, in this ultra wealthy 70+ year old capacity range. So I think it kind of depends also on the people you're targeting. If you're an organization that, if you're going to be relying on next generation fundraising really heavily, then you definitely want to be investing in that.
Yeah. Cecilia, another question from an anonymous attendee, which I think is worth putting out here. Can asking people to up their gift seem ungrateful?
Yes, it can. If the relationship has not progressed to the point where so a donor should be ready for that ask. And it's kind of like, I kind of think of it in the same way as when you cultivate a friendship, right? Like if you were to ask a girl that you just met for the first time last week to be in your wedding, it would be so weird and so uncomfortable. And
Level
like,
jumping.
if you said yes, it would be because she was incredibly uncomfortable, like didn't know what to say. But like with any friendship, you cultivate it over time. Like you climax with that ask to be my bridesmaid, right? That's like, 15 years into our friendship or whatever.
Yeah.
And the point is that when the donor feels like they're involved in the organization, they know you personally, they have good rapport with you, they trust the organization's leadership, they trust you to do the things that you say you're going to do. Then I think the response, it's very rare that you're going to get the response of being offended. You might just say no, you might just get no, like I can't make that commitment right now. But in general, donors, I think, understand. And especially if you're a growing organization and you're actually doing the things you said you were going to do, and you're coming to them with a credible plan, they want to continue to be part of that growth plan.
Justin, anything you want to add to that?
Nope. I would just say, I mean, it's only offensive in my view if your relationship is very poor, your cultivation is very poor, or you're doing it too often. But otherwise, I mean, if you've got great cultivation, you've got your donor relationship is fantastic. Not every single time you meet them is an upgrade, then I think it's totally fine. And also your thankfulness, I mean, and gratefulness for all the previous gifts. But yeah, if your cultivation and your stewardship, if you will, are there, then it really is infrequent where it will come across as ungrateful.
Yeah. Justin, what to what extent should major gift officers or people who are playing that role, no matter what your title is, you might just be the one person shop, and that's fine too. But to what extent should they be going to events, conferences, galas, other events here, not your own? Is that part of the mix to help build your file?
Yeah, you got to pick the right conferences for sure. Industry conferences where it's going to be a bunch of other gift officers have some value for sure, because then you can network with other gift officers and you just chat about what's the new foundation or whatever it is. There is value to that. But I think attending the conferences where that donors will actually be attending, that's really important. And having a game plan there, is it just to mill about and hope that you see somebody, or is it to try to figure out who's going there beforehand or whatever it might be? But you got to have the game plan to make use of it. A lot of times I see gift officers, even more so presidents, actually showing up at events and galas, and they just kind of like hang back and drink a cocktail. And it's like, well, that's just a waste of $1,000 for registration. You really got to work it. It's worth buying the VIP ticket to get into the VIP reception. In my view, it's not worth going to the gala if you're not buying the VIP ticket. You're going to be in the cheap seats and you're not going to be in the VIP reception. And that's where all the rich people are. So you gotta pick the right conferences and have a game plan. But the industry ones, as a gift officer, there's value, but not as much as going to the big gala or the big, even better than a gala, like the big donor retreat weekend or something like that. Those are the kind of things you really want to get to.
Cecilia, I might make this our last question. Unless other people, if you have another question to ask it now. We have 7 minutes to go, and I am Swiss, and we end on time. We start on time, we end on time here at American Philanthropic. Cecilia, this is the last question I'll ask you, and then we'll go to the chat and Q&A if there's anything else there. We've mentioned very briefly the board and leveraging your board to find major gift prospects, maybe to make major gift asks. Talk us through a little bit, like, what is the role of the board in major gifts?
Yeah, so I think in an ideal world, you have a what we call a give or get policy in place. So in a good board setup, they're either an expectation that they're giving a certain amount or that they're going to help you get a certain amount from other sources. And by the way, if you already have a board and you don't have a policy like that in place, this is something that you can phase in over time. It's not like, oh, well, I missed my chance, I inherited this board. Things can change. So I think your board members theoretically should be some of your best natural partners for getting into that donor community. You may have board members who are scholars. That's great. Then you can use them, take them into meetings to be like the meat and potatoes conversation, to actually speak about the thing that you do that maybe you aren't quite as well versed in. But yeah, I think leveraging your board as natural partners, leveraging them to host events for you at like small salons, again, not galas, but like I'm having a cocktail reception for 10 couples at my beautiful home in whatever, Scottsdale, right? People, apparently this is not a very popular fundraising method in other parts of the world, but Americans love this. We love going over people's houses and like seeing their living room. Like Justin said, you got to see someone's living room to find out what they're really about in life, right?
Right.
So those are usually really successful. And if your board can't give, then they should certainly be doing those like small events for you,
Right.
or volunteering their time elsewhere.
Justin, anything you want to add?
No, I think that's great. I would just reiterate there. I worked with a 75-year-old organization that did not have a give or get policy in place and I did this when they were probably 72, and we put a give or get policy in place. So it's never too late. But I would also reiterate, and I stand by this, is that every single board on every single nonprofit should be a 100% giving board. Any board member can give a single dollar. Everyone should be a 100% giving. There's zero excuse for that. So
Yeah.
just throwing that in there. It's not unrelated, but it's very worth saying.
Mm-hmm.
Bonus question, because we have 4 more minutes left. What is your favorite part? If people aren't doing major gifts work yet or just starting, what can they look forward to? Like, what's good about it? What's fun? What's rewarding? What's satisfying?
Sitting in TSA lines are really my favorite part of travel.
Being frisked.
So, go ahead, Celia. Sorry.
No, airline miles, that's really exciting. Status, no. Truly, I think that what I've always enjoyed the most about doing major gifts is the people you get to meet. Just really, there's a whole gamut. You know, the donor class is huge and varied, and there are, you know, the millionaires next door who have scrimped and saved their whole lives and only go out to McDonald's so they can give $1 million request to an organization. And then you've got the really flashy, you know, more coastal types who maybe live rather extravagantly or less interested in philanthropy, but all of them are interesting, especially the wealth creators. There's so much to learn from there. Yeah, I think meeting the donors has always been my favorite part, and just hearing their stories, even when they don't give. Yeah, and you get great stories. That's the other thing. As a fundraiser, you will have awesome
best stories.
That's the thing. Like, there are a lot of stories to dine out on, because there's some crazies in there, right? I mean, I've had UFO discussions, you know, and not recently, not the real UFOs that we all know exist now, but you know, before that, yeah, there's so many discussions, and then there's lots of things. Yeah, that's true. Good stories. Justin, any last?
No, I would just say that. I would just say it's meeting the people. Some of the most incredible people I've met in my life are people, just donors that I've met with, their stories, their backgrounds, their families. You know, just really incredible stories of innovation and whatever it might be. And then working with them to, I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it is really exciting to help them realize their philanthropic dreams and their desires, like really helping them match what they want to achieve with an organization. And it's really exciting to see that happen and see real joy with the donor when they're making that big gift.
So that actually answers the last, and this is the final question we just got from anonymous attendee. Thank you very much on Q&A. It goes to answer this question. My organization is nervous about asking donors or board members for referrals because we don't want to ask too much of them. How do you overcome that? I think Justin just kind of indicated how you overcome that. Is like, hey, aren't we all in this together? Aren't we trying to do something here that's good in the world? And doesn't it take resources? Why in the world would we be nervous about asking people to help us identify the resources we need to undertake this X mission, which is, and especially if they're a donor already or a board member, they believe in it. So that's the script you have to have running in your head. Not that you're bothering people or like, no, we're doing something important here, for God's sake. Some of us are giving our lives to it, right? And if you're on the board, you're giving a good chunk of your life to it. So you just got to power past that, you know. If you push back, say, hey, I'm not going to, you know, we just want to talk to people. We're just going to share what we do and give them an opportunity to join us. If they don't want to join us, that's okay. We'll just keep moving on. But we're all we're doing here. We're not trying to take money from people. We're not trying to pay our own salaries. It's like all the stuff people worry about, you know, we are trying to execute a mission, advance something that's important in the world. These are already people who said they think that's true. Why wouldn't they want to help us identify more resources for that? That's my pep talk. You agree?
Agreed.
I agree. That's great. I'll give right now. You didn't even
go.
I'll do it all.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you,
we
guys.
really appreciate it. It's always great to have you on. Thanks for the chat and the Q&A. And we hopefully will see you at a future one of these. Usually I have something I'm supposed to be pushing forward, and I didn't come prepared, so I have no idea what comes next. But go to AmericanPhilanthropic.com, click on events. You'll see the stuff we have coming up. We do have a training. Our flagship training is coming up in Denver in September, mid-September.
Yep.
If you're at all interested, you're one of these new nonprofits that was on here today, that would be a great thing to come to. It's intense. You get the whole 101 on fundraising. So I really recommend it. Go to AmericanPhilanthropic.com events. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Next is a webinar on September 2nd, actually.
Sorry.
Major
There's a
gift.
webinar on September 2nd.
Yes. Yes.
Is that major gifts too?
Specifically about, yes, major gifts, perfecting the art of the ask. It'll be yours truly and Sarah Moore-Scogan, a well-known and excellent fundraiser, joining us for that. So
There you
Awesome.
go. Okay. Next time I'll come prepared. It's the Scotch. It's like, why am I'm drinking Scotch. and it's
That's
Scotch.
right.
It's
Blame it
not.
on Scotch.
All right. See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
thanks.